I'm Bryce Butler from Access Ventures, and this is More Than Profit, a show where I talk with founders, investors, entrepreneurs, and leaders of all kinds about living and working with purpose, how they do it, and why. There was a report in 2010 from JPMorgan Chase that called impact investing a new asset class, a $1 trillion opportunity over the next decade. With an industry that was established in 2008 following the first use of the term by the Rockefeller Foundation, here we are, nearly 10 years later, and things could not be more confusing. And the danger is that when impact investing is everything, it's nothing. We're on the verge of unbelievable adoption by mainstream investors, yet more than ever, the infighting within the industry is whether impact is concessionary or non-concessionary. This back and forth creates unbelievable confusion for the very entrepreneurs we believe we are serving. We have been misguided to think that mashing them into the same conversation serves the greater good. Now, I'm a firm believer in one-pocket thinking, but the idealism of the future clouds the present. In the here and now of money and investing, people simply do not function or think in this way. People need handles to grab onto as we press into a more robust understanding of community and redefining our relationship with money. A couple years ago, Steve Case announced in his New York Times piece that his Rise of the Rest fund was not an impact fund. And then because of backlash, he offered a clarification. I found interesting that his fund, even by his own definition, is an impact fund. Is it intentional? Is it measured? Is it transparent? The whole notion of the Rise of the Rest fund is built off the premise that communities across the country have unbelievable entrepreneurs that simply lack appropriate access to capital, predominantly women and people of color. Is that not then the intentional impact statement? It will be measured also because the entire premise is that you can find high-growth companies in off-the-beaten paths. Therefore, it will demand measurement to proof test this. It undoubtedly will also be transparent in order to validate their theory of Rise of the Rest. And if it's not these things, was it simply a grand marketing exercise and will inevitably be no different than any other fund? Was not the purpose of the fund to provide important capital to underestimated entrepreneurs with limited access? So if this is not an impact fund, what is? In the world of investing, too many people still believe the quote from Andreessen Horowitz that impact investing is like a houseboat. It's not a good boat, and it's not a good house. Too many investors are confused that impact and financial returns can be made without concession, and therefore they feel that in order to attract capital, they must set themselves against impact investing, doing nothing less than relegating it yet again to the kids' table at Thanksgiving. My guest today gets right at this issue of impact. Candice Brackeen is on the move, and everyone needs to be on notice for what she and her life and business partner, Brackeen, are building at Lightship Capital. They're a new venture fund, unapologetic about underestimated founders and unapologetic about being capitalists. They're on a bold mission to prove the markets have failed female founders, failed founders of color, and failed LGBTQ founders across the Midwest. In the end, you can't help but cheer her on, and you can't help but understand why these terms are confusing and why they're not helpful, in fact. And even debating them, the nuance of them, is a position of privilege that needs to be acknowledged.
I'm from Toledo, Ohio. I've always been a pretty high energy person. So anyone that knows me knows my nickname as a kid was Bunny because of the Energizer Bunny.
That's awesome.
And so that's been a long-term thing. Oh my goodness. I'm the kid who my dad still talks about today, where he would look in the rearview mirror back at me in the station wagon and I would just be talking to myself. It wasn't necessarily to him. I was just getting it out.
I love it. I love it.
That's how I am today. I anybody who's around me, I can talk them to sleep. So it just is what it is.
That's great.
So who was the Candice of my teenage years? I was really active in high school. So I was on the religious commission, and I was a cheerleader, and I was in the marching band on the dance team, twirled a flag.
Wow.
And just kind of always into as many things as possible to keep me out of the house. I just didn't want to always be at home. It was a very interesting house. My dad wasn't around a ton, and my mother was my mother, and she had battled her own demons with alcohol. So I was always out doing things and wanting to explore the world. And I guess that busybodiness has gotten me to where I am today.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that in previous seasons, there's been a lot of folks that have done amazing things in their lives, and there was a person or their group of people that really influenced them early on. Who was that for you? Like, as you think back, I mean, I'm hearing you say wanting to get out of the house, but clearly you are doing amazing things now. What helped you get there? Like, who are those examples in your life that really kind of helped move you in a direction that like was positive and exciting? How did you get activated at such a young age to kind of pursue the dreams that you have?
Oh goodness. I think there's always been like, there's been a few people. So in high school, well, I guess when I was 12, we moved to a house near the University of Toledo, and a state senator lived next door. Her name was Linda Fernie. She never had any children, and was just always so kind to me. I was the oldest child in my household, and she would just invite me to dinner at her house. Or I remember for my senior year in high school, she got us tickets to go see Grease at the Stranahan Theater. And so it was my first time at the theater. And it was just always those little things that allowed me to kind of like see the larger world. So I can say like her kindness led me to see the arts and helped me to understand state government. And just the kindness, I think, of strangers is always amazing. And then in college, there was a professor who just took interest in me during like Econ 102. I guess he had watched me during Econ 101. I had done really well. And then in 102, he said, there's a scholarship available for first-gen college students. I looked at your records. Looks like you're a first-generation college student. You should apply for this scholarship to get a fellowship in econ. And I applied in two families from Cincinnati, paid for the rest of my college career. There was, kind of a travel stipend, a book stipend, paid for room and board, everything. Awesome. And there have been people like that throughout my life that have kind of like made a small tweak, because I didn't have like the family pedigree to get me there. It was really more like the universe sent me some amazing people to kind of fill in the gaps.
Yeah, and I love it. And I think that's more commonplace, and we're going to get to kind of like what you're doing now, but you went to college and university in Cincinnati. How did you find yourself being a founder? Which I think, was that right out of college? Where did that kind of enter into your kind of progression of things? How did you find yourself?
I've had 15 lives. All right.
I know.
So there's been a lot of these things. Like, again, back to the bunny story.
Exactly.
So in college, I did take a gap year.
Okay.
Became a flight attendant. And while I was a flight attendant, they asked me to help do some scheduling. And I realized if I did this scheduling stuff, I wouldn't have to fly as many days, and I could go back to school. So they were like scheduling people on paper back in the day. So this is like it was 99. So they're still like scheduling people on paper. I basically took my statistics skills from college, built a little algorithm or like super complicated Excel spreadsheet for them, scheduled people in 2 hours. Didn't take 2 days. Now, I still took my 2 days. Did what I needed to do. But I was able to get that thing done. And that's awesome. I used that scheduling system and what I learned from some of my statistics classes and started building these scheduling systems for the Cincinnati Recreation Commission here. And I started scheduling all the umpires. So that was my first like business outside of college after I graduated. And I used that kind of same scheduling idea when I started my small tech company, Hello Parent. So it was a mobile app to help parents connect and organize activities like playdates and Mom's Night Out. And so that whole like methodology of scheduling things has kind of like gone from college and stats class all the way through that company. But when I graduated, I was a consultant with some of the TAs and a few professors. But
I think I love the Energizer Bunny kind of circuitous nature of it. Like you're just seizing opportunities, taking risk, and my background's I was in the military, then I was a pastor, then I worked at a family office, worked at a manufacturing company now, and it's people look at my LinkedIn profile and like, where did you come from? Like, they just don't understand how all these things connect. I'm like, sometimes I don't, but I digress. So you were a founder, and then, you got involved helping founders. So how did you make the transition from being a founder to then helping support founders, and why? What was the reason you made that flip?
I think it's something I just have always been good at, is kind of like building community and helping others. So way back in the day, I owned a fitness studio here in town in Cincy, and it was really focused on supporting women through their pregnancy, postnatal, and kind of through and beyond. And it was that community building that I loved. And so when I kind of started running out of money with my first tech company, I had also started a thing called the Black Founders Network here in town, where there were Black founders. We all met up once a month and shared our network. And that group really, it was so great for the founders here in town. And we will relaunch it post-COVID, but for almost 6 years now, it's been a pretty amazing group. And so it all started there in that group, with us sharing knowledge, network, investors, lawyers, you name it, was that group that really helped. And so that's really what kicked off the accelerator.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and we were talking before we jumped on the podcast, just kind of some of the things GAN Ventures, or GAN rather, Global Accelerator Network, is kind of into, with specifically in COVID, I think the mental wellness of founders. And so I'd love to kind of get your perspective. I think sometimes, we know founders need capital, founders need mentorship, founders need density and space and connection. Those are true. Those are no. I'm just curious, like after the number of founders that you've worked with, and the number of just communities in which you've interacted, what are some of those other things, those intangible things that founders need? So I'm listening to you talk about this Black Founders Network, and it's I've got to believe connection and community, just being heard, being seen, being present. That's what I'm picking up. But what would you say? What are things founders need? If you're in the business of helping founders, what are the non-capital, investment type things that we should be thinking about as communities to support them?
Sure. I think that, again, multicultural communities are not monolithic. So I'm not saying this happens for everyone.
Sure.
But I will say that we've chosen to take a really holistic approach to the way we deal with our founders and talk to our founders. Some founders who are from immigrant communities sometimes have to have a much kind of higher touch with their family. And so you have to remember that their nuclear family that they grew up in are sometimes their responsibility. And many times monetarily, sending money back home, being home fairly often, really being in touch with their family. And so we have to think about that. And when mom or dad gets sick, and we're talking about a 35, 40-year-old, founder, that matters to them, because in their culture, it is their responsibility to take care of their parents, even if they're other people. And so I think there are little tiny things and tweaks that we've had to take, as a group. And so we think about those things. We think about, if a person is moving to a town that they don't know about, where's the barber? Where do they worship? Where can they really break bread? Where will they feel safe? Is there who are the investors that we're really introducing them to? Because are they all safe spaces?
It's amazing.
So there's just a lot of things that you have to think about. And people always say to us, that seems like the most. But change sometimes takes the most. So that's what we're doing.
Well, and I think, so we were going to talk a little bit about Lightship and kind of the fund you're working on, but one of the things that I think is distinctive is you actually, correct me if I'm wrong, live with your founders for a season, or maybe not in all circumstances, but there is as a part of the diligence, there's this opportunity to kind of be in the same place, to get to know them. And I have to feel like that's kind of part of what you're talking about. You get to see someone, talk to us about that a little bit. Why do you do that? And what does that look like for you?
Sure. So in end of 2018, we acquired a brand called New Me Accelerator. It started back in 2012. and it was kind of like the real world meets tech. And when it first started, it was 3 months in a house out in the valley, teaching founders the tips and tricks of having a venture backable company. Over the years, it morphed into being a 1-week program, and it was hosted in a house. And for a week, the founders, break bread and work with, break bread and build their company alongside mentors, investors, and kind of just a value creation team, helping them to grow their businesses. So over the course of 5 days, we live with them. And for a long period of time, I was cooking breakfast, lunch, and dinner alongside the founders, cleaning the house and all those things. And you learn a lot about people when you're in a personal space. It's not for everyone, but I can say that we've invested in companies from that boot camp that we offer still. And then post-investment, just depending on what program, or maybe they just come through the portal, we do spend 2 or 3 days with them in just whatever region is appropriate for them in the country. And we give them a tour of the city that we're in. We spend time eating meals together. And for a few days, we work on growth. And we offer that time to them in perpetuity, as long as they would like to be a part and want help building value. And if they feel like we can build value, that's what we will continue to do. And I think it's an amazing process.
Yeah. Well, I loved your previous example about immigrant founders, because I think one of the things that I've really appreciated about you and getting to know you a little bit more over the last several months is just your intentionality of like listening to the person. And I think sometimes with investors, we come in to the boardroom, so to speak, and we have all of these assumptions. Like we look at the financials, we make our assessment, and we just vomit an opinion without actually even asking a question as to like why something might be the way it is. And so I love, like, as you think about like working with underestimated founders of color, women, LGBTQ, people with disabilities, I've got to believe like just listening to them and asking them questions is super helpful in understanding like why they made the decisions they made. And that like there may be a path forward, like, hey, maybe we do it differently in the future, but at least understand, instead of coming in with all of these kind of like preconceived notions and assumptions and then just throwing that on the table.
Yeah, we have to say, like, when we start a strategy session with the team, we're always like, this is your company. You know what's best. And you can push back at any time on any opinion that we have. But we're coming to you with, what has worked with others, what has worked for growth, and we want you to push back if necessary. And if you leave here and you're super excited about it and you get back and it's not working, let's revisit it. Or you continue running your strategy, but we know that they know best, or else they wouldn't be there. I mean, I'll give it a small example. So we invested in this awesome company called Healthy Roots Dolls. It's a multicultural doll that helps young Black girls to better love their hair. And right now they're coming out with a few more dolls in the line. And she sends me some of the test dolls, and I look at them, and the founder, Yalitza, says to me, so what do you think of the eyebrows? I said, the eyebrows look great. And she's like, oh, I don't actually know why I asked you, because you were around in the 90s and you had like 90s brows. And right now these little girls love caterpillar brows. And she's absolutely right. She's absolutely right. We don't know it all. We don't know it all. And I've got to listen to them and the direction of their company.
That's awesome. So how did you figure that out? Like, is this just something you've always done, or is this something like you experienced and you're like, we're going to do it differently as you built Lightship? Like, what did that look like? Because this is radical. I mean, to a point. Like, I think the way you interact with the founders is not one of superiority. It's one of cooperation. Like you win, we win, you win. It's this mutuality. How did you come to that? How did you arrive at that kind of flow for the way you work with the founders that are in your portfolio?
Ooh. So I think that together, the other general partner, Brian, and I think that we both come from an upbringing that we like to, build people up. Um, I'm Buddhist, and so for me, like none of this stuff is about me. It's about the founder and them winning, and the universe will provide for me, right? And so if I put all of my energy behind them, I know that it will propel them forward. And I don't know. I think just like you said, listening matters and paying attention to the founder matters. And just for some, I think it's just the culture of the organization, of who we've hired over time, and what we've found works best. We've been tweaking this model since 2017 when we started the accelerator. I think in the beginning, we were very much focused on we're going to follow Global Accelerator Network's plan to the T, right? We're going to do this 12-week program or 16-week program, and we're going to run straight through it. What we found was we needed to make some tweaks because it didn't work for our particular demographic of people. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? And so we've made little changes over time, like the timing of the program that we offered through the accelerator didn't necessarily work for working moms. So we didn't have any parents in our first cohort. Why? The timing didn't work. And so we had to take a blended approach to in-person versus virtual. And so it's been tweaked over the last few years.
I love it. I love that. I mean, that's the ability to kind of just be honest and to say, we don't know everything. We're gonna try this. We're gonna do the Global Accelerator Network thing, and we'll learn as we go and tweak it. Like there's an evolution of things. We're gonna get better at this, which is great. So I want to shift gears a little bit. So now, outside of everything else you're working on, Lightship Capital. So I'm gonna park that because you do so many other things, but Lightship Capital specifically, $50 million fund, headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio, focused on the Midwest, focused on a very unique demographic of founders. Talk to me about your vision and why. Why do you feel like Lightship needs to exist? And why does it exist in Cincinnati, Ohio?
Oh, okay. So why does it need to exist? Oh my goodness. Well, 0.67% of Black founders are venture-backed, right? So all of venture for last year, that was the number, 0.67. That's not even 1%, and we are 13% of the population. So that's where this all started. It was Black founders not getting funded, and then recognizing when you look up, oh, you're not getting funded, and you're not getting funded either? Like, oh, women? And, we're 51% of the population. And so, that's the reason why. And then if I think about being a capitalist, there's a market failure. So the market has failed this particular group of people, and we're attacking that market failure. We're saying, okay, well, if no one else is going to get in here, we're just going to shoot these fish in a barrel. And I think that is absolutely the case and why. So yeah, we're going to go after it. And why Cincinnati? So when we first started the Black Founders Network meetup group, we went to a couple of local organizations like trying to get funding because there were a lot of meetups at the time and people would kind of sponsor pizza and beer, cheese and wine. So we went around and we asked, and a lot of folks were like, no, I don't know about that one. We don't want to touch it. We're not going to put any money into it. It's grassroots. Keep on moving with it. And I would look at the other tech meetup groups and go, well, why not us? And so for a few years, I bootstrapped that on my own.
Wow.
And then we started having tough conversations with each other about but why? But what's going on? And if you really dig back, there are some fantastic articles written because we talked to the news, we talked to council, because we couldn't quite understand the disparity between founders of color and women and other people that were getting funded in the community. And so really over the last 5.5, 6 years in Cincinnati, the leaders of Cincinnati, including myself, now I've become a leader, We've been having tough conversations on race and placemaking and building organizations and inclusion. And it's taken us a few years to get here, but through really candid and tough conversations and giving each other grace, that's why Lightship is able to exist here. And I can say that the folks at Cincy Tech, I talk about Mike Venerable all the time. He's my favorite human. Wendy Lee, when she was at Centrifuge, was a huge proponent of what we were doing. Eric Weissman, you name it. There are some amazing people here, and they've all cheered me on. And in the beginning, many of them gave me a portion of their budgets. So we got started on a $175,000 grant from Cincy Tech, the Brandery, Centrifuge, Hamilton County Business Development Center. They pulled their money together for us to start. And so folks don't realize that. Like, they pulled for us in 2017.
That's awesome.
It's been a long time. And so why here? It's because of that energy that started years ago.
That's awesome.
And then you add the icing to the cake that the state is involved as well.
Yeah. So I recently went on the, I don't know what to call it, the Brackeen tour of Miami.
Oh, we call that the Brian tour. That is definitely
the Brian tour. Okay. And it was phenomenal. So he and I are on the board of Endeavor together, Endeavor Midwest, and I was floored. I've done a lot of ecosystem tours, and I've been to Cincinnati, and I've obviously been impressed with Cincinnati. Miami was interesting, and I think the thing between the two of them, and I think more so the people that Brian introduced me to, and now just talking with you, is what I think is distinctive in ecosystems that I think are getting it, is they have this kind of this ethos that everyone is welcome. If you show up, if you're a giver, if you're willing to contribute, we may disagree ideologically on various things, but if you're willing to contribute, we're gonna work together. We're gonna push each other. We're gonna ask hard questions. Like, I don't think we shy away from asking hard questions, like you said, even when you were building the Black Tech Group in Cincinnati. But I think that's interesting to think about, like, a welcoming where we're not going to look at like where you went to high school. 'Cause in Louisville, Kentucky, very, old school parish community. When they say, where'd you go to school? It wasn't college. It was high school.
They do that here in Cincy too.
And so you never feel like you're from here. And I've been here 16 years. And so that's an indictment. But I think, how do we embrace that? How do we continue to nurture? Like, I was in Miami a couple of weeks ago, and that was it. I mean, the sheer volume of people that come. The mayor is a Cuban-American Republican, and yet he's doing amazing things with people from all different walks of life. And it's just like, come. Like, if you want to help, if you want to be, let's do it. Let's do it together. And I think that when I say why Cincinnati, I was kind of a softball, because I think I've experienced that not just from the Cincy Tech scene, but also your leadership, Brian's leadership over the years. And I think that's something to take note of. That's not, the normal kind of, I think the three legs of the stool, capital, density, mentorship, those matter. I think they're underlying that as an ethos, a culture that people just imbibe as a people. And I think that's missing in a lot of places. So Lightship obviously focused on some cool things. I wanted to ask the question, because this season we're looking at fund managers, which you are. You're a fund manager. You're targeting entrepreneurs that are doing great things, helping them scale. You're looking for returns. I think one of the reasons I wanted to do this season specifically of More Than Profit is to talk to the managers of funds who are targeting returns. They're unapologetically looking to get money for their LPs. They believe wholeheartedly in their vision, their mission, their fund, the entrepreneurs they're backing, and they're going after it. And because I think where I am in Louisville, and I'm sure you experience this in Cincinnati, a lot of times people, when they hear of your strategy, there's a question: will that return? Is that concessionary? And they may not ask it directly. I don't know. I'm curious if anybody ever asks you that directly. But I'm just floored that in 2021, with where capital has gone, the movement of ESG, impact investing, you name it, like just this movement of value-driven investing, that we still have tons of skepticism in the middle of America, that you can align this unbelievable purpose, like backing entrepreneurs, and unapologetically pursue outsized returns. What's that been like for you? How has that journey been? Have you ever experienced that, going out talking to investors? Like, anybody roll their eyes, raise their eyebrows as you're talking about what you're trying to do and targeting returns?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we have
not a softball, but I was just
yes, very much, Bryce. And you have to just kind of like, and anybody that knows me knows that my facial expressions are like very intense. And so I have had to work on my eyebrows and my face a little bit. But, really early on when we were talking to our mentors, there was some terminology that we always made certain that was in what we were saying. So market failure, right? So we talked about that market failure with every single person. We talked about, we are not a social impact fund. We're looking to get market rate returns on this fund. So it was something we always said in every single pitch, so that people realize that that's not why we were here. And so it's been a kind of constant thing that we've had to discuss with people. But really like drilling down on the actual data behind your return on investment with a diverse team, with a diverse board. These are all facts. And so we're constantly having to lay out the facts for people. And I think we are at the point where we know who is never going to give us a yes, and who will potentially give us a yes. We've done, and Brian talks about this actually quite a bit, Black GPs, or actually Black founders just in general, do really well with angel investors because there is a one-on-one connection. Most of my LPs are old white dudes, right? And people automatically assume that every old white dude has some level of bias, right? But lots of old white dudes have that one Black friend. And why? Because they had a one-on-one connection, right? They know them as people, right? So as soon as everybody like in the world realizes like we can just all be people and meet one-on-one, that really works. So for us, we've done really well with, individual ultra high net worth investors. And it's slower to close that fund of funds, foundation, et cetera, because what you end up with is a group of people on an investment committee, and you don't know which one of those people is asymptomatic for bias.
The power dynamics.
Yeah, and you've got that one person who you don't know why they're saying no, right? But they might be saying no.
And they can hide behind the group.
They can hide behind the group, and that's exactly what we have run into. But once you show the numbers, for us, we've been slowly building this portfolio and raising money. And so we're at 8 investments right now. And what's undeniable is the amount of revenue and the amount of traction for the first 8. And so we're proving that as we're going toward close at the end of June.
Good.
And so it's the numbers. The numbers work for anyone, right?
Yeah.
So as long as you can prove the numbers, it works.
I want to go back to, because I think it's fascinating, because I did a podcast last week with Glenn Yelton. He's been in the ESG space for 2.5 decades. He's the head of ESG at Invesco. And, we were talking about terminology, why definitions matter. I think it's interesting that you would emphatically say you're not a social impact fund, when by definition you are.
Yep.
And so I would actually, because technically, and I'll be the contrarian, a social impact fund is pursuing some sort of social or environmental purpose. Now there's going to be measurement of that. So the distinctive typically is it going to be quantifiable and measurable, and then reported to the LPs as a part of the overall investment strategy. I think what I'm curious, why not just embrace that? What is wrong with saying that you're a social impact fund?
Oh, there's nothing wrong with saying it. Absolutely. And certainly by definition, that's what we are. But what we've seen with some of our peers, minority peers, is it has limited their opportunity for raising a fund.
Thank you. I was hoping you would say that. I was hoping you would say that. No, I mean, like, and I wasn't trying to like tee you up and like, but I think that's why the terms matter. And I think there's also like and this is what Glenn and I were talking about last week in Louisville, the investors that I talk to, when they hear social impact, and it's not bad because it is this squishy spectrum. They immediately jump to the impact strategy of local foundations that is concessionary.
Yeah, and it's charity.
So it's charity. It's charity with, like some return, or at least a return on capital, but not a return on investment, not a capitalistic approach to pursuing market-driven returns. And I think there's, especially in mid-America, and that's why I was excited to talk to you. You're focused on female founders of color, LGBTQ founders, like these founders that are underestimated in mid-America. And a lot of the investors you're going to talk to are in mid-America. And so their first thing is social impact, lights off, that's concessionary. We're done. Let's not even have a conversation.
Yeah.
It's just interesting. I saw that on your website, and everything you guys talk about, it's like this.
Yeah, we put it on the website. It's not just on the deck.
I love it. It's great.
I need everybody to know that's not what we're doing here.
Oh, and and I printed off an article, and I've highlighted, here's an article, that you're literally saying, we're making it clear this is not a social impact fund. We're capitalists at heart.
That's right. That's right. Because some of our LPs, they're very clear.
I love it.
I want this money back times X.
Exactly. Well, and I think you want that too, because what you're trying to prove is that the market has failed these underestimated founders. And by doing outsized returns and proving that, it's like, well, what else can we unlock? Yeah. And I think it's helpful because it's like, here you are, a venture fund manager, working with these amazing entrepreneurs, trying to reframe and redefine how we think about capital in America, and you're targeting the very things that people say that they need, which is return. And 5-10 years from now, you're gonna be able to turn back and be like, look at what we did. And hopefully, not just 50 million's unlocked, but billions and trillions of dollars continues to move towards, I'm hoping that you're successful. I know you'll be successful because of what you can unlock, into the future for just regular companies. And that's where...
And they're so good. They're so good.
It's so good.
They send their monthly updates, and I'm like, you did what?
I know.
We make an investment. They're at a couple $100,000. 6 months later, or less than 6 months later, they've doubled it. And you're just like, that's all it took. It's amazing. It's amazing.
I am curious, just as an aside, there's been a big push as well around alternatives to equity, in the last several years. Have you looked at that? Do you have any opinion on kind of what that looks like for founders, revenue-based financing or profit sharing or co-ops? Have you seen any of that through your pipeline as a way to support founders across the country?
We are trying to figure out different ways because we have a focus on, one of the focuses on CPG companies, right? Mm-hmm. So, how do you have the proper working capital? Yeah. And not spend everything that you've raised. That one still is difficult, and I think we're working on it. We've got to figure out a way to help, this particular demographic with that first little bit of money to get started. For some, it's like a $10,000 to $25,000 gap to really prove the concept, and that's really usually filled by friends and family. So, how do we fill that one $10,000 to $25,000 gap to really jumpstart more women and minority founders? But other than that, crowdfunding's been great for several Black founders. You look at Start Engine in particular, that has been fantastic. Quite a few Black female founders have raised that kind of $1 million and gotten themselves started just based on their network. So. No, those are the only two I can really think about. Yeah,
that's great. Yeah, we're big believers in we need more and better. Like we need venture fits certain types of companies. I think personally, what I'd like to do is try to think about like, how do we reimagine success? So we don't push entrepreneurs into one definition of success. So, like founders you work with, venture backable companies, growing high growth companies, awesome. And that's great. That's a certain path. Someone that goes out and raises revenue-based financing or debt financing from a bank is able to get, the guarantees or whatever. That's successful. You're building jobs, you're building wealth, you're reinvesting in your community. That's what we want. I think sometimes with entrepreneurs, as I've seen, it's like if you're not that venture company raising traditional equity on that safe or convertible note or whatever, that you're like almost like a tier 2 entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of what I'm trying to help kind of reimagine, where it's like, I think we need it all. Like, I think the more ways we can reimagine capital to support founders, we're going to be better for it.
Yeah. One of my first companies, was a stroller franchise. So you push babies in a stroller at the mall or at the park. And I put some money in with my dad and bought this little tiny franchise. And so the second thing was a fitness studio. And I got a bank from a tribal nation out west. I couldn't find a regular bank to fund what I was doing. And that's how I got started. And that was my path into entrepreneurship. Doesn't make one better than the other. One can guide you into one can guide you back into the other. So, I started with a brick and mortar.
Yeah. Well, and I love one of your portfolio companies. I'm a huge fan of Fresh Fry.
Yes.
and I tell the story because I think it highlights exactly what you're saying. Like one of the first dollars they got was a 0% Kiva loan. And
I did not know that.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremiah
cool.
is one of the most humble people that you'll ever meet.
Ever.
And he has been grinding for years. and that's what I mean. Like, the hustle of these founders is just phenomenal. But one of his first dollars, and then he did a $35,000 loan with us at character based, no collateral required, and now he's one of your portfolio companies. He's raised $3 million of equity, venture backable. I mean, the dude's killing it, and I couldn't be prouder. But to your point, he started with a 0% Kiva loan. We never know where people are going to end up. We never know if you never know. And so it's
why do we get to decide?
Exactly. Why do we get to decide?
Why are we the gatekeepers?
That's a really good point. Well, thank you I could talk all day to you. I wanted to ask one final question. Like I've been asking everybody this season on it, and it kind of came out of a conference I went to last year, which was looking at kind of this notion of impact, value-based investing kind of going mainstream. And I think anytime people talk about something going mainstream, there are fears and there's excitement. There's hopes and there's pauses. Like, as you think about the future and what you're trying to build with Lightship and what you're pressing forward towards with supporting underestimated founders, what gives you hope? And I'll rephrase it because I always like to end with hope. What gives you pause as you look to the future? Looking back at 2020, all that happened, what still kind of gives you some pause as you look to the future? I know as the Energizer Bunny, you've got to be the most hopeful person. But I'm sure there are some things that give you pause as you think about the future. And then what gives you hope? Like, what are you unbelievably excited about for the future as you look forward?
Oh, so what gives me pause is that history has shown that people forget very easily. We forget when tragedy happens. We forget, we forget those inflection points, and we sometimes ease back into bad habits. So I think that's the thing that scares me the most. But I'm hopeful if I look at the past, right, the roaring 20s after another pandemic, that some amazing things can happen over the next decade. And we hope that those things will help things shift. I'm excited to know who the next Yalitza Jean Charles is from Healthy Roots Dolls. I hope that she's a household name. People know Build-A-Bear, right? I'm excited to see a founder's name on a screen and for the world to know them. And for us to not just instantly think, who's the next Elon Musk? Who's the next Mark Zuckerberg? Who's the next Steve Jobs? Those are all white men. And I hope that we can look to some women and to some people of color. So I'm hopeful for that. And I feel that the world is finally ready for it.
To learn more and follow along with Candice, check out lightship.capital. Thanks again for listening to More Than Profit. And if you've liked what you've heard, do us a favor by subscribing and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Bryce Butler with Access Ventures. Check out our work at accessventures.org. Thanks for listening.